Video we're going to be talking about blocks. Now you can find blocks all the way at the bottom right here, right under the variables in the list. Now blocks have many useful functions in high-level coding. When you're trying to create a big game, for example, you can use blocks to have a bunch of code run at the same time every time you use the blocks. Now let me give you an example of what I mean by this. Let's create a block with our own custom name. We'll call this block jump. There you go. Now, once we create the jump block, you can see two things pop up. One right here called define jump, and another block right here that just says jump. Now these two are connected through what is defined in the jump right here. So if I went to motion, if I go to motion and move 10 steps and turn 15 degrees, and I define jump as moving 10 steps and turning 15 degrees to the right, every time, or let me go to events. So as you can see here, it's moving 10 steps forward while turning 15 degrees. If you noticed before, turning 15 degrees only turned it at one point. So it would only be fixated at one point and it wouldn't move from there. But now that we have 10 steps, it's making a small circle around where it's supposed to be. Now we can see this more clearly if we set the steps to a higher amount. So if we do 50 steps, as you can see, it's moving off the screen and turning 15 degrees every single time. And there you go. So blocks are used for a variety of things in Scratch, and a block doesn't always need to only have two blocks to define it. You can have as many blocks defined here, so every time this block is used, all of the code below it, it's going to get run. So let's try it out with another one. Change size by 10, and let's do next costume. So now you can see that jump is defined with 4 blocks. Move 50 steps, turn right 15 degrees, change size by 10, and next costume. So every time I use this block, it's going to run all of those things once. There you go. It's slowly changing costume, and it's slowly getting bigger while it's turning around. So those are the basics of blocks. You'll be using blocks in your future projects along with the other things you've learned to make your project a bit more efficient. Now, along with just defining the blocks to do something, you can also have extra inputs along with the block. As you can see here, I've defined a block that says say right here, and there's an open circle right here which can be used for anything. The way I can define it is when I define say hello, I can make it say something down here, for instance, and instead of saying just the normal hello right here, I'm going to use the variable hello that's been created by this definition of a block. Now what this will do is whenever you use the block and write in your own thing, like let's say hello world, whenever you type in your own custom message right here, this will replace this variable. So now when I use this block, the variable hello right here actually represents all of this. So when I'm telling the code to say hello for 5 seconds, what I'm really telling it to say is say hello world, because this variable now contains this hello world. So if I run it really quickly, as you can see, the sprite will say hello world. Now, it might be a bit confusing because this variable right here isn't exactly like the other variables that you might define. This variable will only be defined when the block is used and something is inputted in the side over here. And whatever is inputted in the side is automatically set to this variable. So let me redefine the block to make it easier to understand. Let's make a block, and we're going to say, and this time we're going to say message. This is going to be the message that gets sent through every time the block is used. So when we create this, as you can see, a new variable pops up that says message. Now, this variable is not defined yet because we haven't used the block that defines whatever message is. So let's go back to looks and make it say the message. So whatever the message is, let's just say my name is cat. Now if we run this, message is now set to my name is cat, and when we say message over here, it says my name is cat instead. You can also define you can also define blocks with other things as well as just a normal input. You can also add this sort of input and just a label. For now, let's check out what the Boolean label is. Now I'll explain to you in a second what the Boolean is supposed to mean. But let's make a block that says if Boolean, then, do something with it. Let's call this is running. So now we have this Boolean called is running. And every time we use this new block called if and then an empty input right here, is running is going to be replaced with whatever this was. Now, you might be asking, what's the difference between this weird hexagon shape and the other input that we had? Well, the other input can only hold blocks like these circle or oval blocks, such as operators or, other blocks like the volume and things like that. It basically works with certain objects like costume number, backdrop number, size, those sorts of things. What this works with is sensing blocks. Now, if you remember from the other videos, these sensing blocks can't be used by themselves. They have to be used with something that has this hexagon shape right next to it. So, is running, let's say if, let's use an if block to check if the cat is moving. If is running, then we'll do hide. So this block, if is running then hide, this is basically checking for some sort of input in the normal block right here. And to check whether the cat is doing something, we can use the when key space pressed move 10 blocks. So that's our pretend running for the cat. Let's pull the cat back over here. So our cat is going to move 10 steps every time we press space. So to check if the space is being pressed, meaning if it's moving 10 steps, we can put if key space pressed right here, and we'll put that right down here. So if it's pressed, then it will check if is running, then hide. So if key space is pressed, then it hides. So let's run this. There you go. So every time the key space is pressed, this sensing block is replaced as is running, and this if block does check if the key space is pressed, and it sees, oh, the key space is being pressed, so I'm going to hide the sprite. So those are the two main kinds of input you'll need for the blocks.